Të nderuar shikues të Euronews Albania, përshëndetje. Mirë se erdhët në Berlin Talks. Siç e sugjeron dhe emri, në këtë cikël emisionesh do të analizojmë disa nga tematikat më të rëndësishme, më thelbësore që do të diskutohen në Tiranë, në samitin e Tiranës në kuadër të procesit të Berlinit. Në emisionin e sotëm do të fokusohemi tek tema komplekse, por njëkohësisht shumë problematike dhe tejet e ndjeshme, ajo e klimës dhe e energjisë së gjelbërt. Për ta bërë këtë bisedë, unë kam në studio një nga ekspertet më të mira të rajonit në këtë fushë, zonjën Jadranka Ivanova, e cila drejton Institutin për Qeverisje të Mirë dhe Politika për Mjedisin dhe Ndryshimet Klimatike në shkup të Maqedonisë së Veriut. Ms. Ivanova, thank you very much indeed for finding time to talk to us and welcome here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to welcome also from all the members of the thematic working group of Climate and Green Agenda within the Civil Society Forum of the Berlin process. And
you have done a great job. We'll take them one by one. But to begin with, Ms. Ivanova, I just wanted to ask you, what can you say about the awareness in the Western Balkans regarding these major issues, climate and green energy?
Green agenda.
Green agendas.
Yes, I think it's much better than before. If you compare where we were probably 5-10 years ago, the awareness is much bigger, especially for climate. It comes also from the youth, because they are much more aware, and then our generation, if I can say that way. For the green agenda, it is something new, introduced a couple of years ago with the Sofia Declaration from the Western Balkan countries. I think people still not grasp what it means, what are the obligations. However, it is much more important for the administration, for the private sector, but less for the population. But I can see in general we are going on the right direction. Capacities, awareness is increasing among the general population, and I hope we will see the results, good results soon as well.
You have traveled a lot in the region to put forward 7 recommendations for the political leaders when they meet and discuss here in Tirana in mid-October. That's why I wanted a follow-up question. Is it felt among all the member countries of the Western Balkans this need to take care of climate and to respect and contribute as much as we can to that green agenda?
Our thematic working group was composed dominantly by the representative of the civil society organization who work in this area. And of course, we are all from the Western Balkan countries aware of it. And then we asked the leaders of both of EU, but much more the leaders of the Western Balkan countries to take immediate action towards protection of the climate and of course, implementation of the green agenda. But within our thematic working group discussion meetings, we also had representatives from the administration, representative from the academia, even from the European Commission, and all agree that this is a priority, that the climate and green agenda is something that we have to implement, that this will go in parallel with the EU integration process of the Western Balkan countries. There is no way forward. Backwards, only forward. And of course, we have to make all the resources available in order to have the green agenda to be implementable in the Balkans.
Ms. Ivanova, I just wanted to ask you a simple question so as we can understand the entire picture. How much of Europe is green energy?
I'm not an expert in green energy, but I will say that the portion of the green energy in the energy production in in the EU is much higher than what is in the Western Balkan. I would say here maybe the exception is Albania, where most of the energy that you are producing is green.
Water.
Yes, it comes from the renewable resource, which is the water. The rest of the Western Balkan countries, they have a bit of a different situation, including North Macedonia, where I come from. Majority or large portion of the energy is produced by coal, so it's not sustainable. But I would say in EU level, the renewable energy is increasing significantly. Also in our countries as well, we can see many activities either supported by the government or by the private sector, where people start to harvest the sun energy and produce electricity. My
next question would be, what is your feeling about the strategy of the European Union towards the Western Balkans in terms of climate and the green agenda?
Green Agenda is a reflection of the very important document that several years ago European Union adopted, Green Deal. Green Deal is a vision of the EU to be by 2050 climate neutral continent. So it means no emission, it means less huge protection of the biodiversity, and that's their policy they reflected on the Western Balkan country by introducing EU Green Agenda for the Western Balkan countries. And there are several objectives that we have to meet, gradually moving towards becoming climate neutral societies by 2050. But there are different targets by 2030 that we have to decrease our emission, also in line with the Paris Agreement. That we all the country have designated our national contribution.
You mentioned, Ms. Ivanova, the fact that which are the targets of the European Union in terms of the EU Green Deal. And as you mentioned, with the 2030 climate target plan, the Commission proposes to raise the EU's ambition on reducing greenhouse gas emissions to at least 55% below 1990 levels by 2030. This is, and I underline it, this is a substantial increase. But do you think that with the present day developments in the Balkan countries, do you think that they will meet this target?
We need more efforts in order to meet. Definitely both by the national authorities, and I would include here as well local authorities. Local authorities. We usually neglect them. They're put aside, and we think that environment protection is only a national matter of the national authority, usually Ministry of Environment. But I would say all institutions should be involved. And in this path, we have to be, and we are actually, as all Western Balkan countries, supported by the EU through different funds which are available. Most dominantly is the EU IPA funds. However, here is the Economic Development Plan for the Western Balkan, another instrument that EU pledged for about 9 million euros for the Western Balkan country in order to gradually meet their commitments in terms of cutting the greenhouse gas emissions.
But different countries have got different realities and different tempos. Do you think that with what will happen in Tirana, in the Tirana summit, a new impetus will be given to these countries to improve and move more rapidly forward in terms of meeting these targets?
We need to do much rapidly, but it depends on the country itself, their willingness, their availability of resources, at the end, availability of the capacity. We tackle all these three issues in our recommendation because we see that more is possible to be done by the Western Balkan country, but as well also with the EU and other donor support. So that's why whether they would meet depends on the dedication, as I said, of each of the country. But I think we are going all in the right direction. Someone a bit faster, someone a bit slower, but I think the path is there. I can see that direction is in the right way.
So you can say that there is mutual agreement that these targets should be met sooner rather than later.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree. It's especially within the civil society organization, but in the government level as well. Yes.
Mrs. Ivanova, I wanted to move now in probably the most important element of this discussion, which is the key recommendations that you are putting forward for the political leaders in the Tirana summit. And I read the first one. You split them in three big areas. The first one is green infrastructure investment. And the first proposal you make, European Union should provide support to the Western Balkan countries by deliberating funding mechanism built on solidarity-based and the multi-level governance approach. How do these two elements combine with one another? Because we are used in a different reality as we speak.
First of all, all the Western Balkan countries are in the process of EU integration. Some has opened the EU negotiations, some are in the process of doing that soon. And negotiations are done on several chapters, and chapter 27, it is environment and climate change, which is one of the key chapters. But definitely, this is the most expensive chapters. In order to meet all the requirements, what are needed, we need huge, we call it green infrastructure investment, like wastewater treatment plant, water supply, landfills, integrated system for waste management, especially separate waste collection, recycling, etc. And it's a huge cost. I would just mention two heavy investment directives, EU directives that we have to implement in our countries, which is the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and Drinking Water Directive. And an average cost is about €1,000 per capita in order to meet.
Which is a lot.
Which is a lot. About 3.5 billion euros, I would say, roughly speaking, for Albania. We had such an assessment about 2 million euros in North Macedonia, but priced 2018, so it's much higher. What we wanted to say, there are huge investment needed. We are not only want to refer to the cost, but also benefit, because if you have pristine rivers, if you clean the wastewater, you have much more benefit for the well-being of the citizens, much better health. Opportunity for tourism is much greater, especially
agriculture and all the
agriculture, healthy products, all of this comes. So we say there are huge investment needed. And with the European Green Deal, on the EU level, we have an exponential development of new legislation with much stricter rules. So in that sense, we say, we have to take into consideration this situation that countries need more resources. It should be based on the solidarity, which means we have to assess capacity of each country. Some country maybe is able to invest more, but not all. And we have to include all the level of the governments, which means national and local authorities. Most of infrastructure in environment is, at the end, will be managed by the local authority, wastewater treatment plant, landfill, etc. So we have to pay particular attention on it. So that's why we said we need to think about it. We need more.
We have to think locally as well.
Of course. In environment, this is the key.
Mrs. Ivanova, another proposal you put forward, which is very interesting as well, although very important, I would stress. EU and the Western Balkan states, you recommend, with support of international organizations and financial institutions, should work towards establishing a West Balkan 6 regional hub focused on infrastructure projects. So you want, if I can put it simply, a mini trans-Balkan government in order to control and implement these proposals.
You were right until the word control, because we don't want to say control.
But someone should basically be responsible for what is happening on the ground.
No, what we are saying is that we see the country having difficulties in using all the funds, which will come later in the next recommendation when you will come to the good governance part. And there are many projects which are of regional importance, because at the end, environment does not have any border.
True.
So that's why we said probably we could use all the expertise from the region and have created some regional projects. Why don't we take and regulate river basin of one transboundary river and also make a good project pipeline so that we treat all the wastewater? Why we don't speak about fast railway among the countries, which railway we know is the transport which is less emitting any greenhouse gas emission. So that's why the discussion went probably...
We have to think regionally this time.
Absolutely. And this could be a kind of impetus, as you have said, to faster implement the requirements.
And do you see it visible?
I believe in regional cooperation. And to be honest, I do.
Okay, let's move on to the second chapter, which you underlined as a very important one, which is good governance in environment. And in this part of the world, good governance is something, isn't it? You recommend prime ministers, finance and environment ministers of the Western Balkan countries should take swift action to enhance the capacities of national and subnational, which is local, authorities entrusted with environment and climate change responsibilities. It sounds very academic, but can you dilute it for us, please?
If you see the European Commission report, annual report of the Western Balkan countries, in each of the 6 countries you will see the same issue. Administrative capacity are very low. Even if we go to the first recommendation for more investment, we had such a case in our thematic working group meetings when someone said, you don't need more investment, you cannot spend the one what you have.
Okay.
And why is the reason? It's an administrative capacity. And you see the Ministry of Environment are really understaffed in all the Western Balkan countries. So if we want to implement green agenda, which really puts a lot of burden and not a lot of obligation to be implemented, Ministry of Environment should be very strong ministries, together with the
to have the right experts to absorb the funds.
Not only to absorb the funds, to implement the requirements of the EU are key. In waste, in water, in air quality. We need more staff. The ministries are understaffed, and we want this to be understood by the highest political level in the country. Whenever the ministries ask for more funding to hire people in Ministry of Environment, we do not see it as a priority for the Ministers of Finance.
Is it because of lack of political will, or is it because of lack of expertise, of real experts of these fields?
I would say that maybe the priority is the Western Balkan country is still more on the economic development.
Okay.
So that's why I think the environment is somehow, I would not say put behind, but a thing to be dealt later, if I can say diplomatically.
Typical Balkan reality in a way.
Yes, so that's why we want to raise the awareness that the Ministries of Environment, the Agency of Environment in the Western Balkan country need to be strong administration. Otherwise, we will not meet the requirements for the green agenda.
And this climate and green agenda is taken very seriously by the European Union. The fourth recommendation you put forward is the process of enhancing administrative capabilities should be expedited considering the urgency of the matter.
That's what we say. If you want to implement the green agenda now, if not yesterday, you have to have more staff, both on the national and in the local level. If you we made such an assessment, how many people in the municipality work on environmental issue?
Quite a few.
Yes, and this is not acceptable.
But how do you recommend, it's not here as one of your recommendations, but how the respective government can tackle this important issue, having the right experts in the ministries and on the ground?
It is a matter of management of the administration inside of each country. Of course, there should be a new recruitment. And of course, we are proposing there should be some policy to keep the administration in the ministries, because we see that because of the salary, some people just leave.
They join the private sector or move abroad.
So there should be different measures combined at the same time in order to have this issue a bit solved.
Mrs. Ivanova, let's move on to the third chapter, which is biodiversity and protection of natural resources. You mentioned in one of your answers the significance and the importance of having these clean environment, but you recommend leaders of the Western Balkans should take decisive measures in securing sustainable funding dedicated to the preservation and restoration of the region's invaluable natural resources. This should be taken very seriously, because it doesn't sound academic or complicated at all. It's pure language.
We had made a kind of a rough assessment. I have to say it's not detailed. How much of the national funds are allocated for the protection of biodiversity, restoration of nature, and it's very little. And also on the EU level, you have a pledge by the ministries that about 30% of all the investment in climate should be related to biodiversity, because the key to protect the climate is biodiversity. So that's why we want to reach out to the leaders that when they are preparing their budget, they have to consider investing more into biodiversity, not just in wastewater treatment plant or in landfills, which are absolutely important, but we say, please don't forget the biodiversity.
Do you see, with your huge expertise in the Balkans, do you see an increase in the funds that the prime ministers and the finance ministers allocate to these important biodiversity elements?
Because we did not see much, that's why we are recommending this. More is needed.
But are they aware, we mentioned the impact this biodiversity has in the real life of the citizens of all the countries, and the impact it has not only in the well-being of our lives, but even in tourism and economy as well? Because my feeling is that when they prepare the budget, they take care of major economic issues and they tend to forget these biodiversity elements.
I would not say tend to forget. It's just, I think, for the moment, environment and biodiversity is not as high on the priority, on the agenda of all the leaders in the Western Balkan countries. To a certain degree, we understand. In order to keep the people inside, not to have a brain drain, not to have people going out, economic should be improved. But it shouldn't be on the cost of the environment. That's why we say, listen, we know that your priority are probably economic, but we have to take care of the environment, we have to take care of the biodiversity, and
we have to meet the standards.
Yes, and this is what we want to make them aware. I believe they are aware, but you know that different sectors are competing, sometimes not privileged, but the ball goes on the other side.
Absolutely right, and this is a problem. But I wanted to ask you a simple question. Which are the countries in the Western Balkans which are paying more attention to biodiversity and taking care of the environment?
Majority of the funding in the Western Balkan countries for biodiversity comes from the donors. Mm-hmm. So depending which country, I think Albania stands quite well on this, which country has good cooperation with the donors, they have more funding and they allocate resources and additional expertise to improve. But it depends, as I said, more on the funding from outside. Still, we did not see right as we want funding from the national budget for the biodiversity protection, and that's why we urge the leaders to do it as soon as possible.
Do you expect the Tirana summit of the Berlin process to take concrete steps in balancing what is funded by the European Union and international organizations with what is allocated by the prime ministers and finance ministers from the internal budgets of these Western Balkan countries?
Of course, that's why we make the recommendation. We believe that they will hear the recommendation and afterwards they will take a concrete step in order to implement. We will have a civil society forum meeting on the 14th and 15th of October here in Tirana with all the civil society organizations. We'll meet and then we will discuss about how to concretely implement this action. There are different ideas that we are now, discussing among ourselves more internally, but we would like to have a bit of real proposal, and we do hope in the Berlin process. We hope and we believe that the Berlin process somehow puts on the agenda the right issues, and definitely this is for the first time they took into consideration climate and green agenda, and that's why our working group would be important and they will listen.
I see that you have a lot of trust in the politicians.
But we cannot do much without the politicians.
That's very true. That's very true and very right.
That's why we have to support it, moving them in the right direction.
Absolutely, and let's hope it happens. The sixth recommendation, and which I find very interesting and important, is Western Balkan countries should proactively align with policies with the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, bringing nature back into our lives. It is a concept of life, I guess.
Yes, this is a kind of a goal that is put on the EU level that all the EU countries should have by 2030 about 30% of their territory protected in a different level of protection as a natural sites. either they will be a national park or they will be separate sites with special management, sustainable management. It does not have to be per se a natural protected site. There are several ways how to do environmental friendly management of the biodiversity in the country. So that's why we say countries are lagging behind. I cannot remember how much is Albania, but they are quite good. About 21% of the territory is protected, but North Macedonia about 13-something. So we need to have...
And the standard should be 30%?
30% by 2030. So that's why we said, please do consider this. Otherwise, we will not meet the goal, the objective, which was also confirmed recently in the conference in Canada. So that's why we say, please take in consideration, it shouldn't be all protected area, but even sustainable forest management would be sufficient as well, or management of some area by the local authorities in an environmental manner should be sufficient as well. But we have to gradually increase the percentage of protected areas in the region.
Mm-hmm. And your final recommendation is European Union should set legislation and establish a mechanism that ascertains a minimum allocation of 30% of climate-related funding for the Western Balkan countries to be invested in biodiversity and nature-based solutions. Perfect. Perfect.
Yes, this is what we spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, we are now reflecting this also on the EU level, that even when they are funding to us, they have to somehow force us to have more funds for biodiversity. Mm-hmm. Because it is a key for climate
absolutely,
resilience.
And in a way, it summarizes all the recommendations that you are putting to the political leaders.
In a way, yes. We try to tackle three issues. Investment, we need more. Capacity, we need more for implementation and to manage the investment. And on the third, we say, please don't forget the biodiversity. It is quite important. We have to pay sufficient attention. We have to protect. And we have very rich region with flora and fauna.
Absolutely.
And that is the richness that we have to keep in our hand and hold it more.
And climate and EU Green Agenda, I guess it's one of the issues that member states of the Western Balkans do find a common language. They have a lot to separate them from one another if you want, but in terms of these issues that we are discussing about, they do agree.
Yes, as I said, EU Green Agenda is a reflection on EU Green Deal. So even the priorities in the Green Deal for the Western Balkan countries, for the EU countries, has a bit different dimension, because majority of the work regarding depolluting activities have been done in the EU countries. They have wastewater treatment, waste is managed well. So here we have a bit of smaller in objective, but still very relevant EU Green Agenda for the Western Balkan countries.
I just wanted to ask you a personal question. I know that you be in Tirana during that summit. My question is, what do you personally, as an expert of these fields, expect from the Tirana summit of the Berlin process? What is it that will make you say, yes, the Tirana summit in terms of climate and EU Green Deal was a success? What do you expect? I personally expect that they will agree on the next steps, but not only agree, but put a mechanism to implement them. All what we have said as a recommendation, more or less, we did not see any, anyone against this recommendation. Of course, they say something could be easier, something could be done like in a long-term period. However, I expect that they accept more or less what we put there, and then take measures afterwards to implement all these recommendations, not only from our thematic working group on climate and green agenda, but as well of the other 6. So I see you are an optimist by nature.
Yes. And so far it serves me well, so I will keep being optimist.
Okay, Ms. Jadranka Ivanova, thank you very much indeed for coming here and discussing with us about these very important issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you also. It was very nice discussing with you. I hope also the viewers will like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Të nderuar shikues të Euronews Albania, ky ishte Berlin Talks për ditën e sotme. Deri në takimin ton të radhës, nga unë Franco Egro, faleminderit për vëmendjen me cilën na ndoqët dhe miru takofshim.